I just wanted to tell you, thank you for being patient with us. I We are now on what everybody has come here really to hear is the story of Sarah McAbee and her husband, Colt. And Sarah McAbee is the co-founder and executive director of Stand in the Gap, a January 6er foundation. She's wife of former Tennessee Sheriff's Deputy and J6er Ronald Colton McAbee. She's co-founder of the Real January 6 Advocate, an advocate for the January 6 community. And if you all please welcome Sarah McAbee. Thank you.
So I usually have a speech, but seems like a fun crowd. So I'm going to go off speech, and I'm just going to go over my story and what our journey has looked like. And then at the end, I would love to open it for Q&A, because unfortunately, this has been my life for the last 3 years, and I think everybody is up to speed like I am. And unfortunately, that's not the case, because we are muted, we are suppressed, and our story gets out in groups like this. So my name is Sarah McAbee. I grew up in East Tennessee. I am here tonight with a message and a story about my husband who is unfortunately still incarcerated. And being here tonight, I have to tell you, is not my forte. I never thought my life would look like this. I grew up in East Tennessee. My husband grew up in a neighboring town, and we were high school rivalries. I was a cheerleader, he was a football player, and it was, high school sweethearts. We got married, and being from a small town, we wanted to get away and start our own life. And so he was in law enforcement. We moved north of Atlanta for about 4 years. I worked in the entertainment industry. I ran a company that worked on Broadway concert shows and films, and unfortunately, that came to a screeching halt during COVID. And I was the vice president of that company and had to let 75 employees go within 48 hours. And I just realized at that point, wow, it's a very tough thing to do. And as you all know, the summer of love hit in 2020. My husband being a law enforcement officer, he was called out to the riots in Atlanta. And the Lord and I, man, we talked a lot that night after I sent him out. And he came home the next morning and walked in the door, and I said, we're not doing this anymore. And I was like, you're 25, 26, we're young. We haven't even started a family yet. And I didn't know if you were okay all night. I didn't know if you were going to die. And so at that point, we had made the decision that we were going to go back home. But instead of going to East Tennessee, we came out to Middle Tennessee, and we're close to some family. He was law enforcement for Williamson County, and I stayed in the industry for a while. January 6th came. And actually, our story starts a little bit earlier than January 6th. My husband had worked overnight, and 9 days before January 6th, so I was in East Tennessee for Christmas with my family, and I got a phone call. And he said, I just rolled my truck 12 times, and the ambulance is on their way. And I could just tell it didn't seem like the husband that I knew on the other end of that phone. So I rushed home, and I met him at the hospital. And that's the reason he was able to go to January 6th, actually, is because he was off work. And he chipped his hip, and his shoulder was broken. And his friend had invited him, friend at the time, I shall say, had invited him to go to January 6th. And it wasn't a very popular thing in our house, but being married, you pick and choose your battles. And I believed he had every right to go to January 6th to air his grievances with his government. I simply did not want him to go because of his injuries. But we came to an agreement, and he left. And I was at work, and I was on the phone. I didn't talk to him. As you guys know, if you guys have been to a Trump rally or any sort of Mule Day in Columbia just recently or wherever, your cell signals are jammed. So I knew when I talked to him on the 5th that I probably wasn't going to talk to him until late again on the 6th. He went to the Trump rally that morning, and he heard President Trump speak. And a lot of people don't really understand how he went from the ellipse down to the Capitol. But there were other speeches that were supposed to be at the Capitol that day, and as President Trump said, peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard and go down to the Capitol. And so he made his way down to the Capitol, And I was actually I was on a meeting with my boss, and very conservative, and he was like, hey, have you seen what's happening in DC? He knew my husband was there. And I said, no. He said, well, let's get off this and go turn your TV on. So I turned my TV on, and within 5 minutes, I had heard that a woman had been shot. And I just knew my husband, and I knew he was one to run into action. And at that moment, my heart sank. I didn't know where he was. I didn't know if he was okay, and I did not know what was happening in Washington, D.C. And so I was on pins and needles for the next few hours, and then I received a phone call from him. And I'm going to tell you, from January 6th at 5:30 Eastern Time to today, Tuesday, April 9th, over 3 years later, his story has never changed. I could pull that phone call today, and what that phone call was and what his testimony was on the stand was the exact same thing. Why? Because it's the truth. You don't run from the truth. You don't change the truth. He came home the next day, and at the end of January, we had heard life went back to normal after that, or so we thought. At the end of January, we knew he was on the FBI wanted list, and I made a call to somebody who worked in the Department of Justice, and I said, what do we do? And he said, Sarah, you don't need to worry about it. They have put everybody that was in Washington, D.C., they took still pictures from surveillance. They've put everybody. They're sending emails every week to us, in the Department of Justice, in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, in DHS, any three-letter agency. They were sending this out every week saying, do you know this person? Report them if you know anything about them. And he said, it's going to blow over in no time. So life went back to normal. We never thought about it again. Until August 17th, 2021, in a pre-dawn raid, the FBI came and took him. I had left on August 13th for work, and I was on the West Coast. I tried to get a hold of him that morning, and I couldn't get a hold of him. I called. He didn't answer. I called my mom. Hey, have you talked to Colton? No, I talked to him last night. I was like, okay, I'll just let it be for a while. Tried to call again. No answer. And then I called him immediately after that, and my call was forwarded. So I tried not to think anything about it. And maybe an hour later, I got a phone call from an unknown number, and I answered it. And they said, is this Sarah McAbee? I said, it is. They said, this is David with the FBI. We just apprehended your husband, and we are raiding your house. And in that moment, as you can imagine, it was a very surreal thing. It was like an outer body experience. Every moment flashed through my mind. I knew what they had done to previous January 6th defendants, and I could only imagine what was happening in my home. So I turned on my cameras, and I had an hour and a half of them raiding our home before they found our cameras. They took 14 items from our house, including our front porch flag, and that was on August 13th. When I said goodbye to my husband, I would not see him again for 597 days. He was taken at that point to Kentucky because there's no holding facilities in Washington, D.C. for the U.S. Marshals. And on August 26th, we had a hearing in front of the magistrate judge, Judge Frensley in the Middle District of Tennessee. And within 5 minutes of that hearing, the government had withheld exculpatory evidence. And so we went into recess. And we were supposed to go back on September 3rd, the Friday before Labor Day, and just so happened that the FBI agent called in sick. So the hearing was again rescheduled. And on September 8th of 2021, my husband was granted bond. But the government didn't like that. So what did the government do? They appealed it, and it went to Washington, D.C., where within 5 minutes of the next hearing, Judge Emmett Sullivan called him a terrorist on record, said he didn't need to listen to the audio, and he agreed with everything that the government was saying as they were narrating the videos without audio. At that point, we knew just what it meant when they said Ronald Colton McAbee versus the United States of America. And at that point, it was just, what do you do? I just went back to life. I worked 2 full-time jobs to make ends meet so I could keep our house, pay for him to be in jail because it costs a lot of money to have somebody incarcerated. And I just did what I could. And on September 5th of 2022, I got another phone call that nobody wants to get. I got a phone call from another inmate telling me that my husband was just assaulted and that they were locking the entire prison down. So I didn't know what to do at that point. I started to reach out to every representative that I could think. And he was assaulted for not wearing a COVID mask while taking oral medication. But mind you, he had been in this facility in Washington, D.C. for a year, never allowed to leave their pod, yet he had to wear a COVID mask every time he walked out of that cell. Quite absurd, to say the least. But this is the stuff that you're dealing with when you are in the swamp. So when my husband first got incarcerated, there's something called diesel therapy. I don't know if you guys know what diesel therapy is, but it's when they take you from facility to facility. Your family doesn't know where you are. You're held in horrific conditions because you're never even in general population. You're held in solitary confinement or in a drunk tank. So he went to one facility in Kentucky to another one where he was housed for 3 days. And then he went out to Oklahoma City for 3 weeks. And then he got moved to Washington, D.C. on one part of the facility for 2 weeks and then got moved across the street where what you hear of the D.C. Gulag, where they hold most of these January 6 defendants, let me tell you, anything you hear about that facility, it's 10 times worse than what you hear. And that's where he was housed until he was assaulted. And then when he was assaulted, their way of taking care of it was to kick him out of the facility. So then he went on another round of diesel therapy and went to another 2 facilities in Virginia until they moved him back to Washington, D.C., pending trial. Now, mind you, he was on a case of 9 people, didn't know a single one of them until he ended up in jail. He was the only one out of 9 that went all the way to a trial. Everybody else had pled out. In his trial, he was incarcerated 26 months before he even stepped foot in front of a jury. And then, finally, after we had decided to go to, once he had gotten a trial, that had been moved 3 times, mind you, the jury selection was something, I don't even know the right word. It was very interesting, to say the least. There were 70 people that were interviewed to sit on the jury. 5 that were picked had just sat on a jury the week before, and every single juror said they couldn't put aside their biasness for January 6th. But 14 of those individuals were picked anyway. Now, you know, in Washington, D.C., there's a 99.6 conviction rate only of January 6 defendants. They only allow some evidence in. They don't allow all evidence in. If you take the stand in your own trial, they charge you with perjury, even if you didn't perjure yourself. They bring in what they say expert witnesses that you had nothing to do with on January 6th. And the ones that do take the stand, like the cops that took the stand in ours, lied under oath. But they don't even know they're lying under oath. Why? Because the government, the prosecution, walks them through what their witness statement is going to be and what they're going to say on the stand. Because the video that I'm going to show is his evidence, and you will see it for exactly what it's worth, broken down piece by piece. We had his voice extracted. The government didn't do it. The government sat on this for 2.5 years. They never played the audio in court, not even in trial, because they either went frame by frame, they sped it up, or they slowed it down so you couldn't hear. But what does one of the officers say in this encounter? I don't know what that man is saying. Well, you're going to hear the audio, and I think you're going to be able to know what they are saying, that he's conversing with them. Because why? He was a police officer for 7 years. He knows what he's doing, and he was trained not only to give first aid, but he was trained in riots. So he knew what he was doing that day. And what did the cops say to him? Thank you. Hey, thanks for your help today. Really appreciate you. But none of that matters in Washington, D.C. because the jury, the judge, the prosecution, and sometimes even the attorney for the defense are all victims They are named victims in these cases because anybody that was in Washington, D.C. from January 3rd to January 7th are named victims in these cases. But what are those people also? Forever on a government watch list. You could have been in Washington, D.C. on January 3rd for a layover in one of their 3 airports. You could have been there for a funeral, could have been there for a work conference, could have had nothing to do with being at the Capitol on January 6th. But they're watching you, and you will never get off that list. The Patriot Act that Bush put in is now being used against our own citizens. Did you know there's 29 January 6 defendants from Tennessee alone? There's almost 1,400 in America, and almost 220 that are locked up in facilities across America as I speak tonight. For what? Airing their grievances on January 6th? For questioning their government? Don't get me wrong, bad things happened on January 6th. But they should not be overcharged and overpunished for their actions that day. Very few people, like my husband, are completely innocent of the crimes against them. They did fight the police, but did the police wage war on them? I would say yes if you watch any of the video footage. Why are you not allowed to claim self-defense? Why are you not allowed to claim defense of a third party? You're just supposed to stand there while the police are shoving women off of stairs, beating elderly women? No, you're not. Only a coward would do that. So I know that if I asked my husband today if he would do the same exact thing, knowing that he was going to sit in jail for as long as he sat in jail and longer, you know what his answer would be? Absolutely yes. Why? Because he was a trained law enforcement officer that helped an officer that was in distress and tried to save a woman's life. Didn't matter if it happened on the Capitol steps on January 6th, 2021, or if it happened in the Chick-fil-A parking lot yesterday. Because he was there that day, because he disagreed with what the government was doing and believed that the election was stolen, that is why he is sitting in jail today. 966 days later. I don't want to walk you through what happened that day because I already have everything. If you will play the video, I will warn you, it is graphic. There is a woman who is deceased in it, and it does cuss. So if you want to remove your children, no, that's okay.
Despite audio and video evidence showing former Tennessee Sheriff's Deputy Ronald Colton McAbee did not assault a police officer on the Capitol steps of January 6th, as alleged by prosecutors. If you listen to the audio as you watch the video, you find out he was helping a Capitol policeman who was down.
Let go of your boat. I know, help you. Let go of your boat. I know, help you.
Don't fight me, man! I'm not freaking hurting anybody! That's his wife! That's his wife! I got you, right? Let me through, man! Come on! I think I can break my fucking shoulder!
And yet this judge has the audacity to say we're not listening to the audio so he could hear that evidence. Why wouldn't you listen to the evidence?
That is the man that I am proud of. And I will never stop being proud of his actions that day. I don't care what the media has to say. I don't care how they tried to smear him. Because when we can stand in truth. The evidence is on our side, regardless of the outcome of trial. 7 minutes of his life, he was served, has been handed down a sentence of 70 months. He will be released sometime in 2026. He is currently in transport. He has left the DC jail, and he's currently in Philadelphia. He'll be in transport probably for a total of 12 weeks, so probably for the next 8 weeks. I will not know where he's at until he lands and he can call me. The government quite literally kidnaps these people. It's diesel therapy. He's supposed to be placed somewhere within 500 driving miles. That's not going to happen. And I have to ask you, I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I don't want you to feel sorry for my husband. I want you to do something. Because we are over 3 years into this. My husband's been incarcerated for almost 33 months. Families have been destroyed, quite literally destroyed at the hands of our federal government. And you want to know something? Our elected representatives do nothing. Nothing. In particular, Andy Ogles, Mark Green, Marsha Blackburn will not even speak to me. And I know they know because I've heard the conversations that have been had. It's not like they're just getting constituent letters. I'm going to tell you, you absolutely can, because I think it's important for the community to get involved. They will tell you there's nothing they can do. While 29 of their constituents rot away in jail, that have had their constitutional, American, human, God-given rights trampled on. As I said before, it took me 1.5 years to lay eyes on my husband. They wouldn't even give us visitation. His hair was the longest I've ever seen because he wasn't allowed to get a haircut. He wasn't allowed to clip his nails. They couldn't leave that pod. They could not even go to religious services. Why? Because they're political hostages in their own nation's capital. And why are we in this position as a country? Because of apathy. Enough good people sitting back doing nothing because it doesn't affect them yet. You know what affects you? The gas prices. You know what affects you? That you can't go to the grocery store and get 4 bags of groceries without it being $100. You know what affects you? The illegals crossing our southern border at alarming rates. You know what affects you? What happens in the schools and the indoctrination of our children? I'm telling you, we were normal American citizens. We lived a little white picket lifestyle. A law enforcement officer that did everything he was trained to do is now incarcerated because they want to instill fear into every single one of you, and they're doing it through us. But you know what's not going to happen? Is that we sit back and go quietly, and we're not going to bend a knee and kiss the ring to our government. But we can't do this alone. We can't. This island is very lonely. Where are the 81 million people or more that voted for Trump? Where are they at? Why are they silent? Because of fear. Because they don't want it to happen to them. Since January 6th, have you seen any sort of march on the right side? Any sort of decently sized protest at our southern border? What about the trucker convoy that was supposed to go through America on 2 different occasions? They did it in Canada, but they didn't do it in America because of fear. Ultimately, at the end of the day. But can I tell you, I'm a very religious person, and faith and fear cannot coexist. It absolutely can't. You have one or you have the other. This country was founded on Christian principles. And we have somehow steered so far away from that. that our elected representatives don't even represent us. Why? Because they're probably not even elected, they're selected. And it's all about the power and the money. I have a very hard time that none of our Tennessee congressional members have done anything. I had one phone call with Scott Desjardins, who was our representative in the home that the FBI raided, and he didn't know anything a year and a half later when I went to have a meeting with him. And why did he finally accept a meeting with little old Sarah? Because I got somebody from the Trump administration involved. That's why. They don't care about us, and they don't care about you. They don't. That is the ugly truth about this entire thing. You know, I'm very thankful for January 6th because it has exposed how corrupt this system is. It's not just rigged against us. It's not just rigged against conservatives. It's been this way for a very long time. But conservatives have turned a blind eye to our justice system. Conservatives are the worst at prison reform. Why? We have rights as Americans until we don't anymore. These people shouldn't be sleeping on concrete floors. They should be fed food, decent food. Why are they not? Because we let them get away with it. Every single one of us. I was guilty of it. Before all of this happened, I knew the system was bad. I didn't know how bad it was. And I was ignorant to it until it affected me personally. But as I said, we're not going down without a fight. We can't. Why? Because our country's at stake. And if you're naive enough to sit in here and say, oh, well, Trump's going to win in November and he's going to right all the wrongs. No, he's not. We didn't fix 2020. We didn't fix 2022. So why do you think you're going to walk your happy hind into the ballot box and vote for Trump and they're not going to steal your vote? You think they're going to go down without a fight? You haven't seen what's going to happen. You haven't seen. It's going to be a very bumpy ride through November, I can tell you that. Probably even through January. But you know what we can't do? Is take it. We can't be quiet anymore. Because families like mine are suffering. Families like mine are destroyed. Trump coming in and giving these guys a pardon doesn't change the fact that they've been gone for their loved ones for 3 years. They are never going to get that time back. Their businesses that were destroyed, my husband will never be a law enforcement officer again. Why? Because he was betrayed by the badge. You think it's bad that the representatives haven't talked to us? How about the FBI going to Williamson County and saying they're not allowed to talk to me? That they're not allowed to write a character reference on his behalf because they will be fired. Where is the courage of Americans? I can tell you our founding fathers are rolling over in their graves right now. Because we have let our country, go to hell in a handbasket. And that's why we are where we are right now, where we have individuals incarcerated as political hostages, political prisoners in our own nation's capital. And not even a mile down the road, in the U.S. Capitol, we have representatives that won't even walk over there to see them or see the conditions. Or you have people that do, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it's a political stunt. These people that say they're good, they're not good. Talk to the people that are affected by this. Go to the school board moms. Why did Louis Gohmert, Troy Nels, and Matt Gaetz have to be the one that talks about my husband on the House floor? Yet our own Tennessee representatives won't. They won't even have a private meeting with me to say, I'm sorry, human to human. I'm sorry you're going through this, but I can't do anything because I have skeletons in the closet that I'm afraid that are going to come out if I do something. Why? Why will Marsha Blackburn go after Epstein's list, but she won't help her own 29? Because they've been told not to. How do we fix this problem? We do it in numbers. And we make our voices heard. and we tell them we're not going away until it's fixed? Why hasn't there been a march on Washington, D.C. and said, let our people go? We are not leaving until you let these people go. Why are they still arresting people from January 6th? 70 people this year, 3 years later, have been arrested. The 72-year-old grandma for praying in the Capitol just got convicted and is going to serve prison time. I'm telling you right now, it falls back on every single one of us for not doing anything. It's a very scary thing to fight this battle. Every single day, I wonder if they're coming for me. Then what are we going to do? Put 2 people in my family incarcerated? Thank God we don't have children. I don't want children in this mess right now. What a horrific life they would have to live. Why? Because we, the people, have to be the people. We can't wait for somebody to come back on a white horse and save us. It's not going to happen. If Trump wins in November, it'll be a miracle. But again, that doesn't mean that it's fixed. He has to go in and destroy the system. Completely destroy every 3-letter agency because no one can be trusted. It's going to be patriots across the country that are going to take people's seat like Marsha Blackburn that does nothing for you. Bill Haggerty, these people do nothing for you. They vote for omnibus bills so they can continue to get paid because they pull a fat salary and get $1.1 million of non-taxable per diem a year so Marsha can ride on private jets. So you guys can pay $3.50 a gallon. I'm just going to be raw and real with you all because this is what it is to be an American. We need to go back to the times that we were meeting in pubs, pulling together what could have been a true revolution on January 6th. What a joke, the narrative they're pushing. This is Tennessee. We have the right to bear arms. How do you have an armed insurrection with no guns? How do you have an insurrection? If they wanted to take that Capitol, they absolutely would have. And for handing down these absurd sentences of up to 22 years, I wish they would have hung Nancy Pelosi. Then maybe it would have been worth it. Why? Because murderers in D.C. get 7 years. My husband was just sentenced to almost 6 for doing nothing. But murderers and rapists walk these streets every single day. Shame on us for letting it get to this point. But it's not at the point that we can't go back. That's the hope that we have. That if we stand in truth and we do it the right way, guys, we have to learn how to play their game. They're always 4 steps ahead of us. Why haven't we learned how to play their game yet? We're just sitting here as pawns, allowing it to happen for how many generations? No, we're not, but we're going to have to be to play their game. It's been a 100-year plan, and when Trump won in 2016, he derailed their plan. And so now they've had to speed it up through Biden. But we can't sit and say, oh, we need to go to the ballot box in November and we need to check our, little code to make sure later that they didn't flip our vote. Y'all, don't be that ignorant. Don't be that ignorant. Arm yourself with knowledge. Stuff like 2,000 mules. Get involved with election integrity. Go to the voting booth. I'm not saying don't vote. I think we have a right to vote as an American. And we have to uphold that part of our Constitution. But we need to go and poll watch. And when they try to come and put up stuff in the windows, we have to say we're not going home. No, we're taking shifts. We have people in the community. You know what really bothers me, speaking about the community, and then I'll get off my soapbox and answer some questions? Where are the churches? Where are the churches? You have a house that burns down. Who's the first one there with donations? The church. You have a family member that's in the hospital. Who's the first one there with dinner? The church. You say something political, like you have a January 6er in your community and their children are suffering because they haven't seen their dad for 3 years. Turn a blind eye. You think Jesus would turn a blind eye? No, he absolutely wouldn't. We just had Easter. What did he do? He knew he was going to be hung on the cross, and what did he do? He washed people's feet. He didn't care who they were. He took care of those in need, and that's what we are called to do. Church is not a building. We are the church. Where two or more gathered, that's where he is at. And that's what we have to do. We have to go meet people where they are. We have to love on the liberals, and we have to pray for them, even though that's very hard. It's a very hard thing to pray for our enemies, but that's what the Lord calls us to do. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's not Republicans and Democrats anymore. It's not liberals and conservatives. You either love America or you don't love America. That's what we are at. And we have to band together for those that love America, put all of our differences aside. All of our differences aside. Because we are fighting a battle in this war. Because this is a war of good and evil. This is a spiritual war that we can't even see. But you have to find your cause and get behind it. Might not be January 6th, but it could be the southern border. It could be the fentanyl crisis. It could be indoctrinating your children. It could be election integrity. Pick up a cause and get behind it. Because just talking about it is going to do nothing. Knowledge is power. So find these documentaries. Follow these people wherever you can get free speech platforms. Talk about it. Go to your churches. Go to your pastors. Go to the people that are involved in church and ask what they're doing. What are they doing for the human trafficking that's going on in Brentwood? Do you know that Brentwood, just an hour from here, is one of the largest cities for human trafficking? They just follow the money. Everything, follow the money. It absolutely is. Find a cause and get behind it. I'm not even going to promote what I do tonight. If you want to go find what I do, you can go on and find a QR code that was on here earlier and find out how you can help the January 6th defendants. If you want to do a writing letter campaign, if you want to write to them. I can tell you, a 10-cent stamp or 60 cents, I don't even know how much they are anymore, and a letter to these guys changes their entire day. When I went, after my husband was kicked out of D.C., I had to go pick up his property. I picked up 4 boxes of letters and cards from the American people. And he told me, Sarah, when we were locked in our cells for 24 hours or more at a time, you have 24 hours in a day, but sometimes they were locked in for 36 before they could even get out and take a shower and make a phone call. I remember getting calls, Sarah, what day and time is it? He didn't even have a window to know. 5-minute phone call. That's what he got to ask. But those letters were like Christmas. When they had to hire mail people in Washington, D.C., because there were so many patriots writing these individuals to tell them that they're not forgotten and that they're going to help bear their cross until they get home. That's what being an American is all about. Why do we tie yellow ribbons around our trees when our troops were over in Afghanistan to bring them home, when we have hostages in our own country that we don't talk about? Don't talk about it, you don't think about it, then maybe it'll go away. This is not going away. It's only going to get worse. You're absolutely right. It is. Because they do them in little test segments. January 6th was a test segment. How far can we push the American people? COVID was a test to see how far they would push you. Still wearing a mask 3 years later and taking boosters? Are you asleep? Your eyes are never going to be unveiled? We'll love you until you pick up the sword and fight for yourself. But it's all a test from the government. At what point are the American people going to push back? I close out every speech that I ever say. I hope you don't sleep tonight. There's been a lot of sleepless nights the last 3 years for us. I hope that you have a fire in your belly now, and it burns a hole in there until you do something. You can either fight the beast or you can feed the people fighting the beast. But sitting on the sidelines, there is no time for that anymore. We are at war, and you either fight for your country or you're going to live in tyranny. Because we are right on the brink of tyranny. And we cannot take our American freedoms for granted. Because freedom is not free. I'll open it up for Q&A for anybody that has a question.
Okay, does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? I'll bring the microphone to you. Okay.
When's the last time that you got to see your husband?
At sentencing in February, it was the 7th time that I've seen him.
Okay. Tom.
How do we get a hold of those addresses to write to your husband or any and all?
Yeah, so if you could throw the QR code back up there.
Okay, so I got that website.
Yeah,
but
so
that'd be good.
it's just a link through that. I don't host it on my site, but it's called Patriot Mail Project. PatriotMailProject.com. They have all the J6ers on there. So they have people that are at home awaiting their trial. They have people that are incarcerated and already serving their sentence. Just know that all your letters will be read by the correctional staff. And to keep it very simple in regards to paper and cards and that sort of thing, it can't have any glitter, any ribbons, anything of that sort. It has to be very basic. If not, it will be returned to you. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Yep. And on there, it'll talk about PatriotMailProject.com. Yes.
I've another one.
Yeah.
I really appreciated your sentiment and your testimony about our representatives. I feel like I'm beating my head against the wall with even my friends and cohorts in the party, with the lukewarm, mediocre cowardice of our representatives. And I've said it to many people, half a dozen men in this room probably, of we just need that somebody, that one person, maybe it could start the fire, who is truly willing to just do what needs to be done and not be bought. Do you, I didn't even know who you were a few months ago. I heard about you, but do you have any either people we should encourage and consider endorsing, or do you yourself have any plans to step into that one of those potential roles? Because like Scott Desjardins could go away for all I care.
Yeah, no. I get asked that all the time. I'm not ready to sell my soul yet. So when I get there, I'll run. But I don't. I literally just told Nicole tonight, I leaned over and said, we need to meet with every Tennessee representative, both on the state and the federal level, to see if there is somebody who's willing to lay it all down on the line and be a hero. Because there's still an opportunity for somebody to step in and be the hero for Tennessee January 6th defendants. And maybe it's even our AG. We talked about that at work today. Maybe it's Scametti. Maybe we put the pressure on them. I don't know, because I've had no luck. None. At one point, when this all went down, every single day, myself and my other 4 members of my family were sending letters, not only to their the Nashville office or wherever they were based out of, but also their D.C. office, to Haggerty, Blackburn, Ogles, Green, and Scott Desjardins. Every single one of them were getting letters every single day, and nothing. Crickets. So I don't know. I will be honest with you. There's a lot that I don't know, even though I've been in this for so long, because I'm getting nowhere. I don't even know what to ask them when I do get on the phone with them, because my asks are too big. Why? Because I want an investigation into January 6th. My asks are very big now because they didn't get involved in the beginning. That is why my asks are big, and there is an opportunity for somebody to step in and be a hero. Green. No, they've actually told me, we don't think your husband did anything wrong that day. It's career suicide. It's exactly what it is. They're cowards. It's career suicide for them because they have something hiding in their closet that they are too afraid that either the FBI or the Department of Justice, somebody went to them. I know for a fact, and I think it's probably the FBI, that's who went to Williamson County and said, if you do this, this happens. So you choose what you want. And I was told that with the lawyers very early on when we started to look for private attorneys. I got on the phone with a very high-end attorney in Washington, D.C., who represents a lot of very high-end criminal cases. You know, my husband I was willing to do whatever to get my husband out, right? And I told him everything, showed him all the evidence. He said, Sarah, I have no reason to not believe you. And I believe your husband's innocent. But I nor my friends will touch this case because it's career suicide. Why? Because the judges and the representatives and the attorneys all go to the same country club. Oh, they all go out to dinner. Their kids go to the same school. So they're not willing to fight that fight.
How did the Texas representative get involved to say that your husband was as innocent? How did that come about?
Louis Gohmert, he was very involved with January 6th. And so he came across the same thing with Troy Nels. Troy Nels went into the D.C. jail. Troy Nels is the reason 2 years later that they got in-person visitation, because Troy Nels went into the facility, and my husband wasn't even there anymore. But the gentleman in the bod, he went through all of their grievances and what was going on, and they said, you need to look into this case. This was an egregious assault, unwarranted assault from somebody who shouldn't have even been in that pod because she was banned previously. But it was a holiday and admin was out and and they got a hold of me. And he just recently, in February, spent 5 minutes drilling the U.S. Marshal Director about the situation with my husband. And Matt Gaetz, I testified in front of Congress in June 2023. And actually, I put all 535 members of Congress on notice because according to 18 U.S.C. Section 4, it states if you know of a crime, you must report the crime. 4 people died on January 6th. Ashley Babbitt, Roseanne Boylan, Kevin Greason, and Benjamin Phillips. The only one anybody ever knows about is Ashley Babbitt because she was shot on live TV. You saw Roseanne Boylan dead. She was beat to death by a police officer. Kevin Greason and Benjamin Phillips, it's up in the air. They say it's natural causes, but could have been induced by the grenades that were thrown into the crowd. Well, that needs to be investigated. But that was June of 2023. And mind you, if they don't report the crime, they could go to jail and or be fined. Do you think any of the 535 members of Congress did anything? No. But why is it people out of Texas and Florida have to talk about January 6th, but Tennessee representatives don't bother to spend their 5 minutes on the floor talking about it? No, I want to, though. I think he's a good guy. Hope he's a good guy.
You did have a representative here today for Marsha Blackburn, and I was hoping to be able to ask him, but he left early.
Big shocker.
I'm sure out of fear. So at least we'll get back to her tonight.
Listen, if we just keep it in their ear and let them know, that we the people know, their representatives know. You know who I'd like to get a hold of? I'd like to get a hold of their donor list. Why? Because I just heard that she had raised over $3 million for her re-election campaign. I would like to remind them that on January 6th, she flipped her vote. She told us that she was not going to certify the fraudulent 2020 election. And then what did she do on January 7th in the wee hours while you were sleeping, just like the stolen election? She certified it. But now she's trying to endorse Trump? Huh. Convenient.
My question has to do with your husband's defense. I would be curious to know who his defense is, his lawyer.
His lawyer is out of Virginia. It's Benjamin Schipelbein.
Is that like Alliance Defending Freedom or one of those kind of,
No, he's actually a federal public defender because we had a federal public defender and we fired them because we went into this thinking in 2021 that what do you do when you're charged with a crime? You go find the best attorney. So we did. We hired 2 private attorneys. And $150,000 later, he was still sitting in jail. And I had a very well-known attorney in D.C. look at me and said, Sarah, what are you doing? Your husband's sitting in jail, and he hasn't even gone to trial yet. You think you're not going to get a fat bill after trial? Fire your private attorney, get a public defender, and save your money for sentencing and appeals. So we did, and we still have our public defender. I like him better than I liked our private attorneys.
he's a federal defender?
Yes, federal public
So
defender.
he's part of the government?
So there's 2 sides of federal public defenders. You either work full-time for the federal public defender's office, or you can work part-time or contract or however they work it, and they have their own private practice, but they will take pro bono cases from the government. They're paid by the government, yes.
Right, okay, so there's influence.
Yes
How
and no.
about, I'm sorry,
Yes and no. Some of them are as bad as you hear, and some of them are not. I will tell you that public defender fought for my husband like it was his brother.
that's good.
He did not let anything fly from the prosecution.
So I know about and I'm sure probably you've heard of Liberty Counsel in Florida, Matt Staver. Have you considered him?
No, I haven't. We have really good attorneys if he would
Okay.
ever decide to switch.
I know that Matt Staver does a lot of pro bono.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and he wins cases at Supreme Court.
So the very interesting thing is you slap January 6th on anything, and it's nothing what you thought it was going to be. You look at what happened so you take Washington, D.C., because anything that happens in Washington, D.C. is a federal crime and doesn't have to be held in Washington, D.C. They could move it. Like, technically, my husband's case should have been moved back to the Middle District of Tennessee because Tennessee has 3 federal districts. But they keep them all in D.C. because they win everything in D.C., keep in mind. But when it comes to Washington, D.C., you look at the very similar incidences, right? So January 20th, 2017, when Antifa and Black Lives Matter and all the left overtook the city on the inauguration and quite literally burnt the city to the ground, everybody had to board up and or fix their businesses. They did hold some of those people in the Washington, D.C. jail where these guys are, but they had a speedy trial. But 4 of them went to trial. 2 ended up in hung juries, and 2 ended up in mistrials. And so you know what the federal government said? We're going to release everybody else and drop their charges. But you have 1,400 January 6 defendants and a 99.6 conviction rate on the same Department of Justice, the same jury, the same prosecutors, the same judges. What's the difference here? How they sit politically. That's the difference.
This is why you, as American, as a nationalist, meaning you're a Christian national or whatever, you're like a Nazi.
Yes.
You are, even if you didn't go to January 6th, if you support it, or you think that the election was stolen, or you even question it, then you need to be made
an example out of.
Exactly.
Yeah, no. If you are white, Christian, male, conservative, they're watching you. They're watching you. 72% of the 1,400 are veterans. 92% of the 1,400 are men. I could spit you statistics all day long, and they would never make sense in your mind. Not when you look at other things that have happened in Washington, D.C., or the Summer of Love. I tried to watch I don't know if you guys watched the documentary, The Fall of Minneapolis. About 1/3 of the way in, I walked out. Because that was also a setup. Why? To start the Summer of Love. That's why. Have you ever heard of people giving up a police precinct No, it was a setup. Everything you're watching has been a setup. Yes.
I was wondering, have you ever reached out to Charlie Kirk and tried to get on with him because he's just, so amazing and really gets you out there, or Candace Owens or something?
Candace Owens, I've spoke to her personally. She won't do anything about it. Guys, when I tell you the people that you think are good are not good, they will not touch this. And this is one of the biggest atrocities, one of the largest stains on American history, and they don't want to touch it. People like that, people like Tucker, and we're slowly getting into that vicinity, but I have to tell you, my husband's story is not unique. It's unique in the fact that very few people like him are innocent of all of his crimes that day, but what's happened to our family is not unique with these 1,400 individuals, and so getting on something like that is very hard because they also don't even know where to begin. They don't know the questions to ask. They don't know. They just don't know. And so when they don't know, they just won't touch it. Yes.
What did the FBI hope to find in your home that related to January the 6th?
Well, they took everything that he wore that day. They took his cell phone. They took his work laptop and his regular laptop. They took our flag. I really don't know why. They didn't even use. Yes. They didn't even use it in trial. But there was a list of the warrant of the things that they collected. I don't know what they hope to find. Probably they hope to find all of his weapons and whatever would have caused an insurrection to pin whatever they could on him. Yeah. I'm telling you, they barked up the wrong tree.
I heard you speak in Murray County, I guess, what was that, 6-8 weeks ago, maybe 2 months, and you are more determined. It was fantastic then, and I was inspired, and I let people know about it, and yet you're more determined and even more powerful today. So I know that he was sentenced since then, and we've been, paying attention, and it's only made you stronger and more determined and more clear, and this was powerful tonight, and I'd heard you speak before. This is powerful. Are you going to is there appeals for your husband? And the second question is, it's just been astounding to me, not just the prosecution in the way they've done things, but the lack of speedy trial, the length of, I don't even understand how that's legal, much less some of the other things of the treatment. There's other prisons with people who are done horrific things, and known, that they've done horrific things, murders, multiple, and yet they have gyms, they have TVs, they have grooming, they can cut their nails. I've never heard of people being treated the conditions. So the length of jail until trial for what they did, and then the conditions. I just don't understand how that's happening. What's the explanation, the legality?
There's no good explanation, I will say that. Yes, we are going through the appeals process. Regardless, he's going to serve his time. He'll get out in sometime 2026. The appeals process takes a really long time, and the Supreme Court takes even longer. But that doesn't mean we're going to stop what we're doing, because what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong, regardless of how much time he's going to spend. In regards to the conditions, there's no good explanation why any American is treated the way that they are treated in these facilities, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and even like county and city jails. A lot of the reason for no visitation, no rec, no leaving the pod was because of COVID. They still use that excuse 4 years later, mind you, for the guys that are still in Washington, D.C. They did say they couldn't even get a haircut or clip their nails because they weren't vaccinated. 99% of them were not vaccinated. But when Troy Nels went in there, he said that doesn't matter, and there was oversight. See, our representatives oversee the U.S. Marshals. They oversee the Federal Bureau of Prisons. They oversee the D.C. jail. So don't let them tell you they can't do anything. They absolutely can. They choose not to. And then
when I was in person and they were asked, they said because it was an ongoing trial, but most have now been convicted, so it seems like, and I don't know that was true, because as you say, they have a lot of supervision and overview. Even if they didn't interfere as far as charges, they still, I can't imagine Democrats being treated this way and Democrat politicians not being on the television every single day, if Democrats were receiving, not being able to cut their nails and not being able to get a haircut and groom and so forth, and
Well,
being
I'll
jailed.
tell you, for Democrats, it wouldn't even happen. You would have told me on January 5th this would have happened, I'd believed you, because I knew how bad our government was. But I wouldn't believe that 3 years later, on April 9th, we'd still be having this conversation. Why? Because they would have said, I thought there'd have been enough people like Blackburn and Haggerty and Andy Ogles and Mark, all these people, right, that are supposed to be on our side. Hey, listen, you wouldn't let us do it to your people. You're not doing it to ours. But they don't care. They've just rolled over and let whatever happen. In regards to a speedy trial clock, everything has been stopped. Everything's been waived without the consent of the defendant. Why? Because there's 44,000 hours of evidence that haven't been released. So they don't even have a defense. The videos that you watched, I had to go find. I'm not an investigator. I worked in the corporate world. I didn't know what I was doing. But I had to have some sort of defense for my husband to get it on the record. And mind you, a week before trial, the prosecution said, you can't have anything in evidence about Roseanne Boylan. It was 2 separate incidences. I'm sorry, 7 minutes? There's not 2 separate incidences. And the whole reason my husband waited 26 months to go to trial was to get evidence on the record of Roseanne Boylan being beaten to death. That's why he waited and was the only one out of 9 that went to trial. Those are the games that the government plays with these people. And this is the stuff you don't hear about. Because unless you're sitting in the courthouse every single day listening to these hearings, you have no idea. Why? Because the left is the only one that sits in the media room to cover these things. And then you have very few people like Steve Baker during the Oath Keepers trial that was tweeting out what was going on. He was a nobody back then. A nobody. He was sitting in the media room to get this information out. Because even Fox News is afraid to cover it. Yeah.
Your husband he was charged under the National Defense Authorization Act, though, was he not, as a terrorist, as a domestic terrorist?
So he never had the domestic terrorism charge, but he is on the domestic terrorist list.
Okay. Okay, because, there was a question that was asked, why is this happening? Why is it taking so long? And you mentioned it earlier, it was the Patriot Act, but part of the Patriot Act we got later on down the road was the National Defense Authorization Act of 2011, which made them have Americans could be charged as domestic terrorists. Now, you want to talk about how evil things are and how bad our elected officials are? There was a Mike Lee, senator out of Utah, put a bill to try to get out American citizens as being domestic terrorists underneath the National Defense Authorization Act. 94 of the senators voted against that. Only 6 of them voted for it. Both of our senators at the time, who no longer represent us, voted for it. I'll tell you how bad it is. Even one of the senators that voted for it was Bernie Sanders, that voted to take Americans off that list. And this is why this is happening. A lot of it's because of that National Defense Authorization Act.
No, you're absolutely right. It's happening because we the people allow it to happen. That's why it's happening.
You said do something. What is the most helpful thing that we can do? And kind of 2 questions. What is the most helpful thing we can do on the larger scale? And what is the number one thing that you need, your family, your organization needs?
That's a good question. There's so much that people could do to take action. Getting involved on the legislative level in regards to congressional members, taking care of these local families, these 29 families, with whatever they need. I'm telling you right now, I don't know how some families have done it, to be completely honest with you. There's people that have sold their homes, lost their homes, some of them, lost their cars, have had to work 2 jobs to take care of their children. Because I don't know about you all, but let's say one of your loved ones was incarcerated immediately. Do you have an extra $1,500 a month lying around for them? Because that's what these families have had to endure at the low end. The way to explain these January 6 defendants to you, or at least the guys that are held in D.C. and have been for a long time, go to church and pick row number 9 and tell all the men, every single one of them, to stand up. Doesn't matter if they're 18 or they're 78, and you immediately take them away from their families. That's what happened. Unexpectedly happened to these people. And they have had to figure it out financially. And, you know, you go back to talking about why these things happen. They've in the facilities, they're trying to break these people mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially. And when they can't do it that way, they try to break them physically. Because that's how evil these people are. And so going back to like what, there's so many things, you know, everybody has a skill set. You either have time or you have money. And both of those are needed. Writing letter campaigns are huge. Getting involved at a local level. We're taking a step back with what we're doing and trying to get involved on a Tennessee level for these 29 families. And hopefully people like our AG Scametti and, you know, bigger churches that aren't afraid to speak out politically can help these families. And then other states can start falling in. Because we're one of the lower states. And in Florida, there's 119 defendants out of Florida. And Texas is right behind it with 92. And they're much bigger. Texas is much bigger than we are, but I feel like we can make a splash. And so literally anything and everything. You have a connection, you have a podcast you want us to go on and talk, you have a local thing that we can go speak at, go send them to the website, send them a documentary to watch. You know, there was something that was just put up recently. It's called J6, A True Timeline, and actually Tucker just talked about it not too long ago in his last few episodes. And they tell January 6th as it unfolds with their own evidence. So it helps people understand why the line and the barriers were gone when normal Trump supporters got there. Because there were people that were there that removed them while Trump was still speaking. So how do you know you're trespassing if there's no barrier? How do you know you're trespassing when the police are waving people in and not telling you to leave?
That's our house, though. It's not theirs.
No, it absolutely is our house. It's a documentary, yeah. No. He promoted it. It's called J6, A True Timeline, but it's on all of his things. And so, literally, I could go through the laundry list of things that people could do to help. Knowledge is power. Go talk about it in your community. You know, talk about it with your family and friends and inform them of what's going on, because this isn't going away anytime soon, unfortunately. And so, you know, our organization, we run a 501c3. I run two. I run a political organization because 501c3s, you can't be political, but that's what we help fund these defendants with. We send their families to go visit them because after 2 years, after Troy Nels had left and they said that they were going to get visitation, everybody was really excited. They were like, we're finally going to be able to see our kids. I mean, they didn't even have video visits. I'm saying you could not see your family. And they were so excited, and then about 2 hours later, they realized they couldn't afford to fly their family from all over the country to spend an hour. That's all they got was an hour on Fridays. So they would have to take off work Thursday and travel and Friday and then go home Saturday. And so we launched a campaign quite literally overnight, and we've funded over 50 families. Now all over. We used to only do D.C., but now these guys are sentenced, and so we do it all over the Federal Bureau of Prisons, because there's people, like there's a gentleman from Tennessee who's being housed in Michigan, over 500 miles. Somebody from Washington's being housed in Florida, and it's impossible for families to visit. So we take care of that. And then the other big thing that we do is we take care of appellant attorneys. We don't do defense attorneys because, as you all know, it's an endless pit and they're not winning regardless. But we will take care of appellant attorneys and all the way up to the Supreme Court for some of these guys. And then there's other things that we do, like grants, you know, for the 4 individuals that lost their lives that day and other individuals that have lost their life. I believe it's 26 or 29, I can't remember, people that have passed away while either awaiting trial or have taken their own life or have probably been killed, some of them, if their family's advocating. So actually, I work with Ashley Babbitt's mom. Her name's Michelle Whithoff, and she's at the D.C. jail every night. She's been there for almost 2 years, every single night, holding a prayer vigil. And that takes a lot of money. And so we offer grants. If they're going to advocate for January 6th or behalf of January 6ers, we help take care of them as well. So when I tell you we've tried to cover all of our bases with it, we have. We are trying to get churches involved. And just get communities involved in whatever aspect, because when they say it takes a village, it absolutely takes a village.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate all of you. Everybody give her a good hand. You know, it's really funny you say to get churches involved. My husband is a pastor, and I'm a pastor's wife, and we have gotten involved with the Republican Party only because it's a platform. Just recently, I sent a text to a lady in a neighboring Republican Party, and the text, I'm going to read it to you because I feel like it's important. If I can get it really quick. My thought was, I've been thinking. I've been going to meetings and leading meetings, and I really don't see how I can be making a difference anywhere with what I'm doing. It just seems like we're having dinners and chit-chatting about things that need to be done, but what are we actually doing? What can I actually do? How does any of what we're doing help anything? I know that this sounds a bit negative, but I really want to make a difference. So I really feel like our group wants to make a difference. So if there's any way that you can possibly help Sarah and what she's advocating for, I really want to encourage you to do that, because the only way we can do it is through groups like this that are doing something, or for our own group to do something. So let's just continue to keep her in prayer as we go on. And I want to ask my husband to come up and give us a closing prayer for this evening.
First off, I want to say you're a powerful speaker. And God has lit a fire in you that would have never been lit any other way. And you're just getting started. And you will run for office. And you will win. And we will help you. Because we the people are pissed. This was a barn until COVID, and it became a church. And we have become people. We were just regular people until COVID, and now we've become warriors. And we have had enough. Now, you stood here and you talked, and I teach people how to teach adults how to train adults. You didn't use the word one time. You didn't stutter, and you knew all your facts. You must be a leader in this nation. You have no choice. I'm telling you. I prayed 2 years ago that God would make me. I don't want to be king. I want to be a kingmaker. You're going to be king. You go do it, because we will support you, and the people will be glad. I sat here. It's been tough for me to sit through this. I'm just going to tell you, because I love this country, and I love what this country stands for, and I can't stand to see these people that hate this country try to tear it down. Use your husband. You know who the pawn is? Your husband's the pawn. That's who the pawn is. And the scripture came to me because I've been telling people that the separation of sheep and goats has begun. Okay? It's a process. I grew up on a farm. You don't start separating sheep and goats right before you get ready to do something. You start that process a ways out. And I'm going to read the scripture. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. This is making me emotional. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep on his right hand and the goats on his left. And the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed to my Father, take your inheritance. The kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." And the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, thirsty, and give you something to drink? Or when did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" And the king will reply, Truly, I tell you, when you did it for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it for me. And he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. And they also answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger needing clothes, or sick or in prison, and did not help you? And he will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do it for me. Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. My God is still alive. When this thing is done, I want you and your husband to come back to this barn, and let's do it again. State representatives and state senators were invited tonight. Marshall Blackburn's representative came tonight. They have heard us in the past. They will hear us in the future. And we're not finished yet, and neither are you. So don't be discouraged, because God's going to use everything bad that's come against you for your good. And he will restore the years that have been eaten away, and he will give them back to you 7 times if you just let the Lord lead you. I feel like I've been at church. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you that all truth sets us free. I thank you, Lord, for those who are willing to stand up. Lord, I thank you that even though opposition and things have come against them, they found faith and not fear. I thank you, Lord, for this group of people here and others just like them across this great nation and across this state. I pray, Lord, that there will be a spiritual awakening arise up in your people, a shaking that shakes the ground, an earthquake, because we are the dirt. And I pray, Lord, there'll be an earthquake in your people, in the good dirt, in the good soil. I pray, Lord, there'll be an awakening that takes place that causes us to have to do something, to be motivated. Lord, when the ground moves, we move. And I feel the earth shaking, Lord. This injustice, these things that have come against these people. Lord, I pray right now over Sarah, over her husband Colton. I pray that you will bless him right now, that you'll give him a supernatural strength and resolve. Lord, you closed the mouths of lions for your believers before. You can close the mouth of the liars. Lord, you have opened prison doors for Peter. You can open prison doors for Colton. Lord, I pray that where he's at right now, he's going to take this and he's going to find a supernatural awakening down in him that he didn't even know existed. And before he was created, before he was born, you knew him and you designed him with a purpose and a call upon his life. It's not going to be wasted and it's not going to be in vain. It's going to be for the kingdom, for the glory of God. I pray over Sarah that you give her peace that passes all understanding. And when others would stumble, her footing is sure. I pray, Lord, that your word will be a light to her path, and that anything that come against her be rebuked in the name of Jesus, and it just can't stand against her. I pray, Lord, you make her a giant in the spiritual realm. And when she speaks, devils tremble. And where she goes, devils flee. I pray, Lord, that as this country, as we await for your return, that, Lord, that we not cry out, Lord, to hurry back, but, Lord, that we say, give us one more opportunity to go out and do your will. That we don't shirk back from your calling upon each one of our lives. I pray, Lord, for this group of people, that you'll go with them, that you'll be over their families, that you will be a guiding light to them. I thank you for this country and the ability to still have meetings like this, that we will not take it for granted. All these things we ask in Jesus' name until we come again. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you all for being here.
And you all are dismissed. Thank you.